Alicia Koya from Agile TV at the Better Software and Agile Development Conference West, Caesars Palace, Las Vegas. And right now I'm with David Hussman. How you doing, Dave?
Good.
How's it going?
Excellent.
From Dev Jam. So for those who are out there watching right now who might not know a bit about yourself, can you just quickly introduce yourself?
Dev Jam's in the Twin Cities, middle of the United States. We do coaching and teaching, but we do contract software development. We have about 50, 60 dev dudes, lovingly called, working all sorts of different mediums and platforms. It's actually, and we just switched it to kind of Dev Jam Studios because we moved into this real cool restaurant coffee shop, so we don't really have a office space. We have garage doors that you open up. It's a sweet working environment.
Cool, sounds like it. So, over the course of the Agile Development Conference, I've been fortunate to sit in some of your tutorials. And you got some concepts which are very simplistic, but kind of really give a major kind of, for me personally, gave a major paradigm shift. And I'd just like to just discuss some of those, and I'm sure that the people watching can get the same value as well from it. So first of all, you say learning from estimates over learning to estimate. What does that mean?
Well, I think people have been like chasing the holy grail of like, we got to get better at estimating. And I think that's usually a symptom instead of the actual struggle. Because somehow there's this mythical thing in their heads that if they could go back in time, they would be better at estimating. And it's easy to be cool retrospectively, you know. So I think what they don't really get is that, for instance, you can't estimate what you don't know. It just doesn't really work that way. So if you do something for a while and it's repetitive, then you can get fairly good at that. But there's a lot to that estimation, and so we always try to tell people, don't worry about trying to say, is it tiny or is it ginormous or is it a 7 or is it a 15? Try to find some kind of a size that's about the right size and go shift from, saying, wow, that seems like it's bigger than I thought. And then it's just the other one we say a lot is from how big to too big. Then they're kind of in the same zone. Because if you give a group of people that are working well together some crazy thing they don't understand, then the numbers should go nuts because they don't know what they don't know. And if they don't go nuts, then they're probably cooking the books.
Okay, cool. Next one you have is products and people over process and dogma.
Dogma doesn't get enough airplay, sometimes I feel like I'm kind of the crabby old guy who's like saying, it's not like their first album, man, because you don't remember when, blah, blah, blah. But my introduction to this whole Agile space was a group of seekers that were, brilliantly irreverent, but they weren't just looking for the next bright, shiny methodology to run to. They were kind of, foundationally saying, what we're doing and what we're being asked to do from a process perspective doesn't work. And so they looked at what didn't work and they said, we're going to do none of that, and we're going to look at what does work and we're going to do it to a ridiculous level because that might just be like, more fertilizer on a good thing. And it's a little bit sad sometimes 10 years later to go into shops and you start breaking down what people are doing, look at some of their problems, and it turns out that their process isn't solving their problems or helping kind of chase new opportunities. And you suggest something different, they say, oh no, that's not how we do Agile. And it's just tragically ironic, and that's what kind of that's about, is that it's the places where people are really doing well, they might not necessarily even be using Agile methods. Like from what I know, Apple Computing doesn't use a lot of Agile stuff. And from what I've heard, there's quite a bit of cowboy stuff going on at Apple. Turns out they're doing pretty well. I'd like to have a little slice of, a little snippet of that recipe. So that's what we're trying to get people's focus on, getting people to collaborate around building something as opposed to saying, no, you have to use this process, or even you have to use this technology. Most of us are geeks, so we've done the same thing to people. It's like, you have to use this tool or you have to use this technology, which is the same, it's a different slice of the same problem.
So is that kind of saying that we should be agile with agile, i.e. do what works and don't get caught up with particular methodology, or saying this is the way it should be done, do what works for us?
Yeah, or practice what Nassim Taleb calls empirical skepticism. In fact, I think he calls people like epistemocrats. Let's make sure that there's evidence of success instead of making it up.
Okay, cool. Next one is building communities over defining roles. What does that mean?
A lot of people come to us because we've been in this Agile space for a long time, and they say things like, oh, we're struggling with Scrum Masters, or we're struggling with product owners. And so we start doing this root cause analysis of figuring out what's going on. And I think they've fallen back into this recipe trap of you have to have these roles. Other people that haven't had some kind of view into maybe Agile methods will say, well, we're going to build a backlog. Who should be there? Do we need a BA and do we need a project manager? And so we end up saying to people, who has the skills? Let's kind of build a community of people that have the right skills. And it's a little bit hippie for some companies, so you have to sometimes help people map those roles back in. It's also a little bit dicey for some companies because it turns out they don't have really the skills they need, but they got lots of hierarchies. Everybody always talks about roles and responsibilities, and I've been on hundreds of projects that had roles and responsibilities documents. That's not what delivers, skills, experience, curiosity, and skepticism. And I think if you look at like a healthy community, it's not a healthy community because there's a postman, and a firefighter. Those are just things that people do.
Fair enough. Interesting. This one as well, coaching, not dictating.
We came up with these little cards because I'm always trying to kind of push people towards things that are meaningful instead of things that are prescriptive or descriptive versus prescriptive. And about 6-7 years ago, at these kind of conferences, there were no coaches. So, in fact, that word was odd for people. They would want to know, what is this coach thing? And now I see a lot of people that say they're coaching, especially when I go into organizations, and all they do is run around and tell people how they're not doing the process. And that's not, coaching's a tough gig. Like if you think of professional football, soccer teams, how tough that gig is because those players are great, and the coach has to earn some kind of street cred with them, and the coach is also connected. If you lose too many games, you get fired from your job. But if the team has a tough game, you can't really come in hot on the team every time. You only get to do that every once in a while. And it's really about saying, while they're playing, did I set them up to be successful out on the field? My sports metaphors are kind of shallow, dude. Actually, I was a soccer playing kid, so yeah.
Fair enough.
But I think that I'm a little bit worried that the coaching metaphor started out really close to the development group. And that was good in like 99 through 2002 because there was a lot of super irresponsible developers. Like dudes used to say to me, I don't need to write tests, I write good code, and their code wouldn't even compile. So it's like that turns out to be good code. I don't really know how, but coaching meant sitting with people, writing code, and pairing with people and trying to make sure that we are acting responsibly, we're asking questions. Some days it's hard for me because I don't get to do that as much anymore.
Okay.
That's what I dig about like DevJam Studios, because I get back to like being close to building things. When I'm helping grow coaches inside another organization, what we'll do sometimes is say, well, what opportunities are chasing? How do you kind of evaluate that within and across teams? Because some things are like, by group, and other things are more kind of cross-cutting corporate level or company level. And then say, if you're going to go help those people, what does success look like? And that really challenges someone that's calling themselves a coach to not just walk in and tell people to do stuff, to be able to say, I've sussed out kind of what their issues are, and I'm looking at how I'm going to help them, and then the process shows up.
Yeah. And finally, how much process is enough?
I wish there was just enough methodology.
Maybe we could be onto something.
That would be a sweet name. I think this is another one of these like ironic moments as the Agile people are making people do all these processes. Some people do that in the name of Agile, and that just doesn't seem right to me, or worse, in the name of Lean.
Yeah, right.
In some situations, any process feels heavy. So like if you go into a space where there's 6 dudes that have been banging away and getting stuff done, and it might be a little bit chaotic, but they're getting things done and they're really bonded. Almost any process you put in place is going to feel heavy to them. And in that kind of a situation, if you don't give people something that's meaningful, they just almost mutiny. They just outright reject it. At larger organizations, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of refactoring opportunities. And still, if you introduce too much process, then people end up talking and focusing on the process, and eventually they don't deliver. So I think enough process is a handful of practices that actually show real results against real problems, or augment existing opportunities. And we don't really roll in with all Scrum or all Kanban or whatever. I think maybe even the Kanban movement in many ways is a reaction to dogmatic Scrum. People saying to someone, you're not doing this, the Scrum butt joke.
Yeah.
And Scrum is just kind of, it started out as one of these things of like, it's just a framework and you have to adopt it. And then it turned into Scrum, but you're not doing it if. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because I was just speaking to Patrick Copeland from Google, and he was also talking about in there's no necessarily a defined process. Each team creates its own process as they go along. It's about the results. It's not so much about getting hung up on the process. It's about doing what works and is comfortable for them to get the results, which is really good to hear that. So I know you
outcome based, like the
yeah.
I mean, they're a verb, dude. Once you're a verb, you just want to continue being a verb. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you've been in the Agile space for quite a long time. Where do you see it going over the next few years?
That's a really good question. Where do I see it going in the parts that I'm interested, or where do I see it going in general?
You can talk about both.
In general, I wonder if there's some people that aren't going to really make the trip to the next level. I think that, like, if you think of like the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, something new comes along and it eats away at the thing that's wildly successful in the Agile community was a new kid on the block when the rational unified process started waning. But we're 10 years in, we're almost where the rational process was. And I think there are some people that maybe it's working, maybe they're happy, or maybe they're just stuck, that aren't going to really change. I think the stuff that's happening that's cool is in a couple areas. One is in, for lack of a better term, like continuous product learning. The people that are producing something, measuring the results, and as like these lean startup dudes say, pivot.
Okay.
That has some assumptions that you're really good at delivering. And I think that's the other area that some neat things are starting to happen, is like more interesting automated testing that's user advocacy testing and not just more unit testing. I think that the mobile space is going to challenge everyone in a whole new way, because we have, if you look at it, we have a really weird thing going on where the mobile stuff feels like the web. It's like 1997 all over again. And so there's all these companies carrying all these extra code base, and then it's all going to collapse back into one thing fairly soon. And that space changes the game, and it really calls for a lot more testing. So like the stuff we're doing this responsive design where we'll have like a Mac Mini in the corner and we'll have 10 devices hanging off it. And we're doing kind of this full-on story test-driven development. So all the developers' understanding of what to do is based on the needs of the users as expressed in the story maps. And that drives everything, and that makes us much more competitive because we are doing less of the wrong thing.
Cool. Well, really appreciate all that you've been sharing. Some great information. I'm sure the people out there watching have got value from it. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, my pleasure, man.